how are Republicans feeling as the results come in? They're somewhat underwhelming for them given their expectations at these midterms.
It is underwhelming for them, Yvonne. And actually, talking to a number of Republican operatives, look, they are, enthusiastic that they will likely win back the House, but by a much narrower margin than expected. I think a lot of the anxiety lies in the Senate, and we probably won't know control of the Senate until either a few days from now or even next month. We're waiting on ballots to be counted in Arizona and Nevada, and then, of course, that runoff in Georgia is slated for December 6th. Now, if one party, either Republicans or Democrats, win both Arizona and Nevada, we will know who wins control of the Senate. However, if they split it, a Republican wins one and a Democrat wins the other, it will come down to Georgia next month.
What have been the major and unexpected wins for Democrats so far?
Yeah, so there have been a number of unexpected wins for Democrats in the House, starting in, Ohio's first congressional district. This isn't really a nationally known or internationally known race, but there was one, Democratic challenger who was able to knock off that Republican incumbent. That was a victory. And then, of course, in Colorado's 8th congressional district, which is represented by Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, she is locked in a very, very tight race with her challenger, her Democratic challenger. So that wasn't really expected. She could very well win, and she is leading. But the fact that it's such a tight race is something very notable. And then, of course, in the Senate, I would say one of the biggest victories is John Fetterman, the Democrat running for senator from Pennsylvania. He won very early on, early Wednesday morning, late Tuesday night. We weren't expecting to get a lot of the results out of Pennsylvania until maybe Wednesday or Thursday, but it was pretty quickly decided in that state. And that's a major win for Democrats. It gives them a leg up, and it flips that Pennsylvania Senate seat from red to blue.
Overall, how big a win is this for Democrats, the party of the sitting president, compared to previous midterms that we've seen?
So I wouldn't call it a win. I would say that this is, somewhat of an underwhelming performance by Republicans, because we still don't know what the status of that, the Senate races are. Republicans are still slated to win control of the House. That's going to make President Biden's job a lot more difficult because they will be able to block parts of his agenda and so on. But it's going to be by an underwhelming margin, or looks like it will be by a very underwhelming margin. Republicans went into this very overconfident, like this was going to be some sort of a major red wave, and it really wasn't. So essentially, Democrats performed better than expected, and going back multiple decades, they performed better than any sitting party of a first-term president has during that first-term president's midterm election. And I think Republicans just underperformed. A lot of it has to do with Republican candidate quality, too. A lot of these Republicans are ultra conservative, very Trumpian. And I think what we saw on Tuesday night was somewhat of a rejection of Trumpism in many parts of the United States.
So where does this now put Joe Biden in the popularity stakes?
So I don't think this is necessarily means that Americans are absolutely happy with the Biden administration. Look, they were given two choices, and, it was fairly split. The country is very divided. However, like I said, in some of these races like Pennsylvania, for example, they were given a choice between a candidate that was endorsed by President Trump and a Democratic candidate. And a lot of these voters went for the Democratic candidate in a rejection of Trumpism. Americans are still very, very upset about inflation, rising gas prices, not necessarily happy with the job that the administration is doing. So, I don't think President Biden necessarily has a mandate, but at the same time, though, they chose, clearly whatever he's doing could be somewhat working in terms of galvanizing the Democratic base. We know abortion access. A lot of us going into this midterm were skeptical as to how big of a role that issue would play, but it turned out to be a galvanizing factor in many races. So, I think it's a mixed bag overall. But, like I said, not the red tidal wave that we expected.
What impact do you think a Republican majority might have on Joe Biden's agenda until the next election?
Well, it's going to make his job quite a bit more difficult in working with Congress. We know that Kevin McCarthy, who, for now is slated to become House Speaker if Republicans win back the House, has, vowed to, block a lot of pieces of legislation and meant, parts of the president's agenda that he would send through Congress. On top of that, you have members of the Republican Party in the House vowing to investigate Hunter Biden over his past business dealings in Ukraine. So that makes things difficult. And there's been some non-negotiables for President Biden as well, even though he has said he would like to work with Republicans. That includes cutting Social Security and, blocking that, and then of course blocking any sort of proposed national abortion ban. So, there might be some room for compromise, but right now it's looking pretty divided.
And just lastly, Julia, we all want to know, Donald Trump said he has a big announcement lined up for next week. Will that still go ahead?
For now, it seems like it will go ahead 9 p.m. on November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in South Florida. We'll see what happens, but the president hasn't been very happy, or the former president, I should say, hasn't been very happy with how Republicans have performed, and he's tied to that. He endorsed a lot of these Republican candidates and campaigned for them. There also seems to be some, I would say, jealousy, maybe, of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and how well he did on election night, and how a lot of Republicans, even Republicans who have been very staunch supporters of Donald Trump, are saying that Ron DeSantis, not Donald Trump, is the future of the Republican Party.